Why Yandere Simulator? Why is that the comparison you made?
I was like clenching my ass cheeks hoping that you didn't say this.
You enjoyed Romeo and Juliet more than Hamlet?
Sarah J. Maas fun.
My brain is like racing now.
Oh no, Alex.
Good job, me. I really don't know how to speak.
Oh God! Can't do this. This is my guilty boner. Family listens to these. Never mind.
Don't you me?
We totally believe you, Dean.
That's still bigger than a city.
It's more than one planet.
We're going to be talking about cosmic horror. This is, in all honesty, a realm that I personally don't have a lot of expertise in, despite knowing one of the biggest names associated with cosmic horror. But yeah, this is going to be something that I think Gabe is going to enjoy talking about a lot. I guess for those who might not be familiar with the genre overall, you could probably attest it to a single name, and that is H.P. Lovecraft, who was basically like a godfather to the genre, like the originator of it, basically.
Essentially, yeah. He's the sole responsible man for creating the genre. There may have been other cosmic horror writers before him, but no one has ever reached like his levels of popularity or iconicism.
Mm-hmm. So I guess with that being said, let's talk about Lovecraft first to open up the discussion. So from what I'm familiar of Lovecraft, he is, I guess, most famous for the Cthulhu mythos. So
yeah, the Cthulhu mythos, the old ones, the elder gods, that stuff. That's the stuff that has, sort of populated most of his cult status.
Mm-hmm. And while I only know a few given names, I don't really know much about it. So Gabe, do you want to run us through like a lot of it, or a good majority of it? Because again, I don't know much about it. So Cthulhu. We've all heard of Cthulhu before. Cthulhu is probably is most definitely his most famous and iconic creature. Mm-hmm. And
what Cthulhu is essentially is Cthulhu is an old one. He is one of the original gods of the universe. There are several old ones, except they're all dead and but still dreaming, and their dreams are sort of seeping into reality. Cthulhu is sort of sitting at the bottom of the ocean, guarding them and keeping them until they once again rise. And essentially the whole deal in Call of Cthulhu, in the short story, is that it's essentially a story of all these people who have either seen Cthulhu or have dreamt about Cthulhu. That's the most common way to see Cthulhu in the mythos, is to dream you're seeing him.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people, if you look at Cthulhu for even a single second, it causes you deep psychological torments. If you look at him for more than a single second, your mind will basically snap in half, and you will be completely incoherently mad.
Mm-hmm.
from that point on. And that's, I think Cthulhu has become popular for, number one, his incredible design.
Oh yeah,
Cthulhu looks awesome, but I think it's more importantly, it very much encapsulates what cosmic horror is about. Is this unattainable, sort of unspeakable monstrosity that causes people to basically go insane by the fact that they will look at it, and their brain having no ability or frame of reference for it, they'll essentially just break.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote at the beginning of Call of Cthulhu that I think I had to pull up my compendium to find it, but I think it pretty much encapsulates what cosmic horror is about. So I think it's a good one to start with. Here's the quote. "The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age.
Wow.
Now, yeah, Cthulhu is obviously, that's not the only story Lovecraft has done. There's a wide plethora of other stories. Another
Yeah.
very famous one that is not quite as well known as Call of Cthulhu, but it is still very popular and very much like an iconic piece of his library, which is Shadow over Innsmouth. Are you familiar with this one at all?
I don't think so. I'll look at it.
Essentially, the Shadow over Innsmouth is a story about a man who he comes into this town, and the townspeople are very strange. They're very rude and unwelcoming. What's most notable about them is how fucking weird looking they are.
Oh, I
They
do
all
know
have
about this
weird-
story. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Do you want me to read the summary of it? Or
Yeah.
the-
Probably still run it through. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he goes to this town, and everyone is super unwelcoming to outsiders. They're super rude to him, and he's very confused about it. But what's most confusing to him is how weird everyone in the town looks. Everyone in the town has very strange, like slimy skin. Their eyes are huge, and like they basically look like fish people. They don't look like fish quite literally, but they look like what you might imagine a person is if they've been underwater for too long, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah.
And as he explores the town, he finds out that the townspeople have been long worshipping a sort of a I can't remember if it's a creature or if it's one of the old ones in the story. It has been a while, I'll admit, but they worship a creature called Dagon,
Mhm.
and Dagon's children, who are literal fish people who live in the ocean. And the guy who comes into the town, he essentially discovers that for a long time the people in Innsmouth have been breeding with these sort of fish creatures,
Oh my god.
and the people of the town are now these sort of half human, half fish people.
Holy
and then-
shit.
Yeah, and by the end of the story, he discovers that his lineage comes from Innsmouth, and that he's eventually going to turn into a fish person as well. And he starts to like the feeling of becoming a fish person, and he starts to enjoy the idea of worshiping Dagon.
Oh my god.
It's a very fucked up story, and that's another very good, I think, example of cosmic horror.
Hmm.
Because that also. Sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh no, I was just gonna add on to something later, but I'll let you finish your point.
Yeah, because essentially that idea of cosmic horror is learning too much, and then the negative outcome of learning too much. In Call of Cthulhu, the protagonist never sees Cthulhu in any of the dream, in any dream or physically,
Hmm.
but the protagonist, just from learning about Cthulhu, has now become a very paranoid person, and he ends the story fearful and paranoid that the cult will come to get him now that he knows too much.
Yeah.
And Shadow over Innsmouth, the moment the protagonist learns that he has Innsmouth heritage, he starts to experience these hallucinations of fish people. He starts to think that he starts to become one of them, and his mindset becomes completely different, and he believes that he will enjoy becoming one of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so what I was gonna add on to is I wanted to talk about another story, and this one is the one I'm most familiar with, and I think it's because it's the one that I really enjoyed reading, and that is The Color Out of Space.
yes, that was another one I was going to talk about. I love
Yeah.
Color Out of Space.
Yeah, I want to talk about The Color of Space because that's the one that I'm most familiar with personally. It's the one that I think, like, the whole concept of it is just striking. I love the fact of, like, it really is a good example of what cosmic horror is, and, you know, it is Lovecraft, so I think that one was wild to me. That's the one that stuck out to me, I think, the most. So if you want to run through what The Color of Space is, Gabe.
Yeah, The Color Out of Space is. I'm not gonna waste time with a whole synopsis of it, but essentially the concept of color out of space is there is this: there's these farmers, and a meteor crashes outside of their house, and the meteor is emitting this unidentifiable color, and it's a color that none of these characters have ever seen. And then the story is essentially shakes out as out of these characters being horribly affected by the color, and this color that is beyond description. It's a great example of it's a great example of cosmic horror. That's actually a good tie-in to sort of what cosmic what cosmic horror was about for Lovecraft, and why I think he really made cosmic horror, which sort of ties into the elephant in the room, that Lovecraft was you
don't have to beat around the bush. You don't have to beat around the bush.
No, he was a massive racist. He was a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe. Basically, every form of bigotry you can conjure, he was one of them. And a lot of this came from the fact that Lovecraft was it's hard to call him like a malicious bigot, because a lot of his, based on what I've read about him, a lot of his bigotry came from the fact that he was just a mentally unwell man fundamentally, but B, a very ignorant man about the way the world worked. Yeah. And a lot of his horror came from a lack of knowledge. He was very afraid of the things that he didn't know and understand. I think the most comically obvious example of this is Cool Air, which is another story he did, which is, when you break it down, a horror story about air conditioning, because air conditioning was invented during his lifetime, and it scared him. So he wrote a horror story about evil air conditioners.
Oh my god! So you're familiar with his upbringing, or you're familiar with like his life history? Then
I've read a little bit about it. I'm not going to call myself an expert, but I have read a little bit about it, and I can say the reason that I jumped into Color Out of Space was because Color Out of Space essentially stemmed from Lovecraft learning that there were colors that were not visible to the human eye, and that scared the ever-loving shit out of him. So he wrote Color Out of Space.
I didn't know that.
But yeah. I'm a little familiar with his upbringing. Both of his parents. He was raised in like sort of upper middle class in Rhode Island. And both of his parents were committed while he was very young, and they both died in the same hospital. So I can't exactly attest to what happened after that, but yeah, he had a bit of a strange upbringing, a lot of it involving mental illness, and he was himself a very mentally unwell person. I think a lot of what sort of made him the person he was, and what made his stories the way they were, was the fact that he was so unwell, and he considered himself an outsider in a world that he didn't understand. In fact, one of the first stories that he ever wrote was literally called The Outsider, and that story,
I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
It's very indicative of how Lovecraft felt about the world and how Lovecraft felt about himself, because The Outsider is essentially about it's about a man who is trapped inside of a castle, and he is trying to find his way out, and he's trying to find his way out, and eventually he gets out after spending years inside of this castle. He gets his way out, and he's been isolated for so long, and he's trying to finally reconnect with people. But as he goes to people, he finds that they're all terrified of him, and they're all running away from him, and he doesn't understand why. He doesn't understand why they're scared of him. And then in the room with him, he sees a horrible, disfigured creature. And then to his horror, he sees he's looking into a mirror. So it's very early standard sort of gothic horror. It's less cosmic, more gothic horror, but I think that speaks to sort of an element of what kind of person Lovecraft was. I'm not going to say I sympathize with him being a racist, because I don't. That would be a horrible thing to say.
Yeah, fuck racists.
But what I will say is that I can understand why so many people, as I said in the pre-intro, I was talking about how a lot of Lovecraft's fans in the modern age are, people of color. He has a lot of gay fans, and these are both groups that Lovecraft would have hated.
Mm.
And I think I'm not going to pretend to be a speaker for people of color or gay or the LGBT community, because I'm barely in one of those, and I'm not even in the other at all.
Mm.
But I think there is something that speaks to people about feelings of like being an outsider in a world not in a world that they don't understand, but a world that doesn't understand them and tries to force them to be what they're not.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to Lovecraft's writing that speaks to that.
Yeah. Well, in that case, then we could segue into another topic that I had. So you mentioned how like Lovecraft's work is been, I guess, pretty, I don't want to say beloved, but like a lot of people do find interest in his work nowadays. All right. So I think with the stories out of the way, let's talk about what makes cosmic horror. So we've already kind of touched on a few things, but like really, like what are some of the like key defining things that like makes a cosmic horror story?
I would say the defining formula for cosmic horror is take something that we know about, but that we don't know everything about, and make the stuff that we don't know about that thing scary.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, you got a cosmic horror. That is essentially that in the most common way that comes in either the ocean or space. If there's something in the ocean that we don't know about and it's scary, that's cosmic horror. If there's something in space that we don't know about and it makes us feel small, that's cosmic horror.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. Like would those two locations be like one of the key defining ones then? So like either underwater or outer space?
Yeah, those were the two. Yeah, I'd say those are the two that like Lovecraft wrote about the most, and I'd say to this day those are the ones that are like the most important.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Like
it definitely does make sense. Like underwater, there's all these numbers about like how unexplored the ocean is, and that's fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Like granted, how like there's already so many people who are scared of going into or like being even near the ocean because, as soon as you reach a certain point, there's no going. Like there's all that emptiness behind you. Like there's not even, you don't have to worry about like the thing that worries me about the ocean personally is not the sharks, not not finding some like crazy carnivore wanting to devour me. So, like it's not, the fear isn't getting killed out there, it's the fear of drowning alone.
Mm-hmm. I think this is another thing that H-Bomb said, so I have to say it so it doesn't sound like I'm plagiarizing him. Mm-hmm. But he, in his video on Lovecraft, he brings up the old joke about how if the paranoid conspiracy theory actually found the room where the government was like was following him and had like a file on him, it would not make him any less afraid of it. He would not be any more afraid of it because he would just feel validated in his fears. And I think one of the way that one would create cosmic horror is by creating something that doesn't validate fear, but just gently tickles with the ideas of with the fears that like people naturally have. Like if someone goes into a large body of water, what they're naturally afraid of in like a big ocean isn't necessarily that something is in that darkness of the water that they can't see all the way down to. but just the idea that there is an incomprehensible darkness below them, and that anything could be down there and they wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
That's what fucks with people. And
that definitely fucks with me.
Yeah, it fucks with me too. I will never go swimming in the ocean ever in my life.
Yeah.
So I think if someone wants to, I don't want to say I'm like an expert on writing cosmic horror. I've written a handful of cosmic horror short stories.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if someone wants to write cosmic horror, then they should.
Don't just stick to space. You can stick with the ocean. That's a good setting.
Don't just do like what Lovecraft did. Don't try to be Lovecraft. If you have a fear and it happens to coincide with Lovecraft, by all means write about the ocean. But I would say don't just write about what you think will be Lovecraftian. Write about what fucks with you and what deeply messes with you. If it's the fear that we're one planet in billions in the universe, then make that fear. Then write about that, and write about how horrifying that is, and what horrific monstrosities might lay dormant beyond our reach and our understanding of the universe as these tiny little third dimensional beings.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have a fear of the ocean, then write about the ocean. I think it's cosmic horror is a lot about like understanding what fucks with you. I think that's the secret.
I think that's probably something to note down on that list. Like I definitely do agree with you. Like when you think of cosmic horror, you would typically associate it with space, and let's just talk about that actually. Like it's even more terrifying thinking about if there is life in the universe, if there's life outside of Earth, like just how fucked would it look like?
Yeah.
Right.
And not just what it would look like, but whether or not a creature who maybe they're so far evolved from humanity that they have no more need for technology and they can just exist amidst space. And as a result of them evolving to such the extent that they have the ideas of morality that we have, it wouldn't even register to them. They could destroy our entire planet on a whim if they wanted to, and we would be not only powerless to stop it, but we would be completely incapable of reasoning with it because it would be a creature beyond reason.
Yeah. And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like thinking about it like that, like you think of some of the most famous movie monsters, like the xenomorphs, and I know this is kind of going on a tangent, but like the xenomorphs.
Oh yeah, the xenomorphs are a great example.
Yeah, like Predator, like those things, like they don't comprehend like how we do, right? And trying to reason or trying to beg for your life, even like that just won't work. They see is food.
Yeah, the xenomorphs are a great example. There's a show that I don't want to call cosmic horror because in a sense it's not really about aliens, but Parasite with the anime with a Y, not the movie about class struggles with an I.
Mm-hmm. That's also a great movie. Complete off note.
Parasite and Alien and like a lot of movies and stories that are about like alien creatures that eat people. Those are really, I don't know if they're necessarily inherently cosmic horror, but they definitely deal with a theme that is very cosmic horror, which is just the idea of a creature not comprehending the universe the same way we do, and how we would effectively deal with that. Because have you ever watched Parasite, by the way?
I don't think I have, no.
Yeah, Parasite's great. Parasite is essentially all about this race of parasitic organisms that came from a meteorite millions of years ago, and it sort of evolved to live on Earth, and they eat people. And the show's
sorry, I'll let you wrap up, or I'll let you continue.
Oh, okay. Essentially the idea in the series is whether or not like they should understand morality the same way we do, because when we eat a cow or something, or when we eat a chicken, like we don't consider that an amoral act. And I don't think Parasite is by any means like a vegetarian propaganda show, but I think it is calling to question the idea that like if we don't view that as an amoral act, then we would have no right to judge a creature whose natural food source is humans on being amoral.
Yeah.
Because it would have no frame of reference to comprehend that. And the same goes for xenomorphs. Xenomorphs, we've sort of identified xenomorphs as like a horror icon, as like a slasher villain.
Yeah.
But what interests me about that is that most slashers are like serial killers. They're malicious murderers who are going out of their way to like do bad things. But for the xenomorphs, it's either food or the natural process of their reproduction requires death.
Yeah.
Which I think that's just I think that isn't, I don't know if, again, I don't think that Alien is a very cosmic horror story, but I think that idea is very cosmic horror, that idea of a creature whose existence essentially depends on like this on human death.
Mm-hmm. And see, I was wanting to tie into that with another franchise that I don't know why it popped into my head because I can't make like the connection right now, but are you familiar with the Cloverfield movies?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I think I've only ever really seen the first movie, and the first movie, or I've seen Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane. Cloverfield, the entire like you can definitely see the monster, like you know what the monster looks like, and it's terrifying when you see it, but it's even more like, for me it was terrifying. It was absolutely like horrifying when it couldn't, because suddenly they installed like a decent enough sense of dread throughout the movie when the monster wasn't there.
Yeah.
And like,
and then it could just pop up at any time. It's just this giant monster roaming about the city. You have no idea when it was going to come back.
Yeah. So I think that just popped into my head. Like I can't really make the clearest connections right now, but yeah,
What's interesting is that I don't think the Cloverfield monster is very sort of Lovecraftian, but you should Google Cloverfield concept art, because the original sort of concept they had in mind for the Cloverfield monster, I'd say, is very Lovecraftian. It is.
Oh yeah, it's like it's a giant whale. Yeah,
sort of this giant whale creature with like fins coming out of the back of it, and those little leeches that it had in the movie are like, in the concept, they're like these human-sized crab creatures that just fall off its body.
Oh god,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's sick. But anyway,
I think Cloverfield's a good example of that too, though, because it doesn't say that any of this in the movie, but there's like a bunch of Cloverfield lore. Cloverfield's a weird movie that it's like a found footage movie with a ton of lore behind it, but a lot of the Cloverfield lore is like, this creature is like a baby, essentially, a species that has just crash landed on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of playing to that idea of there's this creature. It's not a monster that has come to kill all humans. It's basically a baby that landed here and is having a temper tantrum. But for this species, like the toddler's temper tantrum is a horrifying, destructive event. So
yeah, it's interesting just like how, like just how many, or just how influential cosmic horror has like become, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even if we can't like closely associate it with it, like even if it's not directly classified as cosmic horror, movie, video game, TV show, book, anything, like there's still a lot of influence, especially in like this concept of the like fear of the unknown, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, like, for me at least, that's what I would personally put down if you were to write like your own cosmic horror story. Like fear of the unknown is a huge pull towards anything. And like you had said earlier, like write about what scares you and write about what you don't know. Like that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Fear of the unknown, discovery of the unknown, and then the negative consequences of that discovery. That's like the 3-step process to a Lovecraftian tale.